This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Yes, everybody! You know the drill. We've started with this podcast to help anyone who is remotely interested in trapping and neutering animals. For the help we did not receive when we first wanted to get involved, and we want to be your new besties in the TNR world. I'm Alex, one of your hosts for this ride, and I'm so grateful to have Adele by my side.
Hey, Alex. Okay, guys. So today we are here with Maia. She is the founder of Pet Project Rescue in Minneapolis. Maia started volunteering in animal welfare in 2005, and on a trip to Mexico in 2007, she decided to start PPR, which began in early 2008. Maia is all about focusing on the root of animal overpopulation, which means offering spay and neuter programs, especially for underserved communities from Minnesota to Mexico. Hello, welcome, Maia.
Hello, thanks for having me. Thank you for being here today, Maia. And we're still in Mexico, so we're still together. We're here on a mission to help Laura from Coco's Animal Welfare that we've seen last week on the podcast. And we're going to learn more on how Maia is helping Laura from the US. But first of all, Maia, we like to ask our guests how they first started to be vegan, because I know you're vegan, so that's what I'm going to ask first.
So I became vegan in 2017. I actually had a good friend here in Mexico who was vegan, probably started like the year before, and just talking with him throughout the process of him becoming vegan, I realized it was something I wanted to do as well. I'd been vegetarian since I was a child, and I just realized it aligned more with who I was. And if I was out here saving dogs and cats every day, I didn't want to be causing harm to other animals, farm animals, wild animals, whatever it may be. So I made the transition and never looked back.
And actually, Maia took me to a bunch of vegan places in Playa, and I have to say the food scene is incredible. So yeah, try vegan food in Playa.
Very cool. That's awesome that you guys get to explore that together. You first went to Mexico in 2007, right? So how did you start that journey of getting involved in animals? Because you obviously cared about animals, and that sparked some interest in working with them. But what bridged that gap between the philosophical interest to helping them in the huge quantities that you do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways I was born this way. Like as a child, I was the one like bringing home every stray animal to my parents, which they were so patient with. Honestly, it's kind of amazing. But yeah, in 2007, I went to Mexico with my husband on a vacation. We found a dog, met with somebody in rescue. We ended up taking a dog home to the States that my in-laws adopted. She was with us up until last week. She passed away at 18 and a half. So it was pretty amazing. But yeah, it was kind of serendipitous that we were coming here, and she passed just a few days before I got on a flight to come back to introduce Alex to everything here. But we have been doing dog rescue, and a little bit of cat rescue for 2 years before we came to Mexico in 2007. So I was familiar with how it all worked. And I came home from that trip just knowing I wanted to be a bridge for the rescue in Isla Mujeres. One of the big obstacles here in Mexico is the low rate of adoption. So that's why a lot of people send animals out, because there's higher rates of adoption in the US and Canada. I will say I think things are changing here in Mexico in that regard, but change comes slowly. So that first dog ignited an interest. I had a lot of other people asking about Mexican dogs. I was working with the rescue, asked them if they'd be on board. They told me I was crazy and that I had their blessing to do it on my own. So I did appreciate that support, actually, because sometimes that's a difficult transition to leave an organization you're working with to start your own organization. But I did that and really never looked back. And we've taken many, many dogs and a couple of cats from Mexico. And I still get updates on a lot of those dogs, and people are so thrilled and happy about it. We did transition in 2018 to focus on spay and neuter, but I have so many great memories of all the rescues we've done here. And, it's never fully out of the system. We're working on a dog right now here in Mexico. So while my focus is spay and neuter, sometimes rescue creeps back into my life as well.
But why did you decide to turn into TNR? Like, what happened?
Mexico has influenced so much of my entire animal welfare career. And one of the great things that I was seeing here in Mexico was organized spay neuter clinics. And I was seeing it long before I was seeing that in Minnesota. And so I learned from people here that if we were going to get ahead of the animal population issue, we needed to be spaying and neutering on large levels. And so I took that back with me to Minnesota, and I started a TNR program in Minneapolis based on all the things that I learned in Mexico. And, spay neuter continues to be a huge program here in Mexico among many organizations all over. And then, of course, in Minnesota, we've grown our TNR program. And as of just July 2024, we expanded from the Twin Cities to all of Minnesota. So we're continuing to grow and grow.
So I know about Mexico. I know you're definitely trying to reach out to underserved communities and trying to impact those communities. But I also know you're doing that in Minneapolis, right? You go North Minnesota. Is that where it's the
North Minneapolis?
North Minneapolis, the underserved community there. And so I know also because your past is being social worker. Yeah, I kind of want to know how that has been impacting what you do for those communities.
Yeah, I work with animals, of course, but I really care about people and social welfare as well. And so that's always been a backbone of PPR. I want to work with communities that are facing barriers to vet care. And again, try and be that bridge, just like we were initially for Isla Animals on Isla Mujeres, where we were that bridge to get dogs out and get them adopted. We are doing that same thing, but with vet care and spay neuter services in North Minneapolis, which is probably one of the most underserved communities in Minnesota. And now since July, we've also expanded to rural Minnesota, which I am discovering is also majorly underserved as far as vet care. There just aren't resources there. So that social worker background, it just really came naturally to me to look at the community and say, what can we give that they can't access right now? What bridge can we build so that everybody gets the resources that well-funded communities already have?
Your perspective on this is really cool, kind of connecting the different demographics of a community, whether that be human or non-human. And it makes a lot of sense given your background. I think you make an important point about how you're not just providing medical care to animals, you're providing access to these services for people who want to help animals. And we see this a lot in the rescue world specifically, maybe a little bit less in the spay neuter world, because there's a little bit maybe like self-serving, saviorism type of feelings in spay and neuter, because it's less like this feel-good thing where I've rescued this animal and I take it back to my, country in the global north and look what a good job I've done. But especially in rescue, we see a lot of people who go to disenfranchised parts of the world that lack a lot of resources amongst their community, no matter the species, and just think, okay, I'm here, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to do this for the animals, and the people are so awful to the animals, and the people are why the animals are in this position. And I think that's going to connect a lot to what we're going to talk about today, of how we exist in these communities, how we interface with the people and the animals, and what we're really trying to do. Are we trying to swoop in and change things in a self-serving way, or are we creating infrastructure like what you've described, or providing the ability to access these resources that humans and animals need?
Yeah, and coming into that, so Maya and I have been in Mexico for a week now, and Maya funds, how many sterilization a week do you fund?
It's usually between 20 and 25 a week. It ends up being just our weekly clinics end up being roughly around 1,000 animals a year, but it just kind of depends on how many animals we trap and how many animals show up that are owned as well.
Yeah, and so she found 20 to 25 sterilization a week, and these sterilization are coming from a very poor area. So we went there a couple of times this week to get some animals to get sterilized, and these peoples, they don't even have real proper houses. They like try to build whatever they can with like wood and things. They don't have water. They don't have running water. We're not even sure they have electricity. And so it's a question of how do we go into those communities and get them even remotely interested in sterilizing their animals when they don't even have a house. They don't even have running water. So how can they even be interested in sterilizing their animals?
Yeah, it's definitely a different world than it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago, where we used to have to beg people to fix their animals. And I think there's been a cultural shift, and that's happened because local Mexicans are involved in animal welfare. It's not just foreign non-Mexicans coming in saying, you should do this, you should do this. Coco's, everyone who works there, with the exception of Laura, is from Mexico. So they're seeing their peers. And I think that really helps send the message to the community. And there's a level of education. People don't just automatically know and understand the benefits of spay and neuter. So it's been a long time coming of just educating, letting people know this is why it's healthy. This is the benefit you'll get from spaying and neutering your pets. And also, I think something that crosses cultural lines in a lot of ways is people don't want to look out their front door and see suffering. There's maybe different levels of being able to handle that. Maybe people in some cultures are more sensitive to it than others, but I don't think there's anywhere in the world where, they can look at an animal suffering and dying on the street and every single person in that community is like, I don't care. I just don't believe that. I think it's hard on most people's mental health, whether they acknowledge it or not. And so what we've seen is a lot of people coming forward and saying, I see this animal, they need help, or I have this puppy or kitten and they need help. I just don't know what to do, or I don't have transportation. I can't get to a vet. Transportation is a major barrier. Obviously, so is financial, ability to pay for things, and just knowing what to do, like knowing that, when my animal gets sick, I can bring them to a vet and they can get better because maybe they've just seen an animal get sick and they die. So it's just a matter of talking to people and having faith that they want to care for these animals. And I just think we've come so far in the last decade, and people are really interested and they're really eager and they want the help. So that's when we show up. And again, we're that bridge. We help break down those barriers. But we're not here to say, this is the right way. This is how you need to function. You're a bad person if you don't do this. I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not interested in going into community and judging. Maybe I was guilty of that probably in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Just not understanding that not everybody functions the way I did growing up. And that's not even cultural. Like, there are plenty of people in this, in my city of Minneapolis that do things where I'm like, what? But it's just a matter of talking to people, meeting them at their own level and providing the resources that they might not even know exist or are available to them.
Yeah, definitely. I think what we hear a lot as international people, especially from privileged countries like America or England, is people having the privilege to travel to other countries and then being like, I went there and all the animals were suffering and the way that people treat the animals. And perhaps it's because they don't see animal suffering in front of them to the same degree that it may be prevalent in other places because of certain restrictions to, as you said, transport, veterinary care, good veterinary care, whatever it may be. But it generally comes from this place of judgment of, well, my country is not like that, so they must be doing a bad job. But we know, especially how, being from France, being from America, we've seen how animals exist in our country, especially if we're talking about all species, right? Shelters are full of animals. They may not be roaming around the streets like they are in Vietnam or Cambodia or Mexico, but there is still animal suffering. It's just perhaps not right in front of us all the time. So yeah, it's a really good point that you make. I'm curious, kind of to bounce off of what Alex said, what are some of the attitudes you see towards spay and neuter when you're talking to people? Have they heard of it before? Do they have any beliefs around it of why they're a little bit nervous about it? What do you hear people think and say?
Yeah, the biggest obstacle we still face is that people don't want their male dogs fixed. Or cats because they think it's going to make them less manly, or they think that, especially with dogs, that they won't be a guard dog if they're neutered. And so we have to explain that that's not actually what affects whether they're a good guard dog or not, or their masculinity. With females, I think what I have seen, and I've seen a real change here, is that they know that the females are having litter after litter, and they don't know what to do with all these puppies. Because while people love puppies here, just like they do everywhere, they're not blind to the fact that there are just thousands of animals roaming around. And, a lot of them don't look the healthiest. And people see that, and they don't feel great about that. And so I think they're just much more apt to allow us to spay the females. There are a lot of misconceptions about, they need to have one litter to be healthy. And so we talk to people about how that's a myth and that's not accurate. People also have a lot of questions about how young they can be when they're fixed, and they're surprised at actually how young they can be. Our standard is 8 weeks or 2 pounds. That's our standard in the States, and that's our standard here in Mexico. And for people who are high skilled, in high volume, high quantity, high quality spay neuter, that's a very standard protocol. And it's great because we get them before they can ever have a single litter, which is always the goal. Anytime we spay and neuter a puppy or kitten, makes me so happy because I know that animal will never, ever in their life go through the struggles of having puppies or kittens, and just how taxing that is on their body. So it's always a major win for me.
And I've also seen here in Mexico, I discovered about the disease TVT, which you can explain what it is. But I've seen that once you explain that to people, they're also much more willing to let you sterilize their animal, which,
Yeah, it's a sexually transmitted cancer. It's often transmitted from male dogs that a lot of times aren't even showing symptoms. And then female dogs get it, and it causes horrible tumors. It's incredibly painful. It's very contagious. And it has to be treated with chemotherapy. And many states in Mexico do not have chemotherapy for dogs. So it's a death sentence. So that's a major motivator for spaying and neutering animals, because once they're not mating, they're not spreading TVT. And even in the US, like, a lot of vets have just never heard of it. So have you heard of it, Adele?
Yeah, it's very common in Vietnam and Cambodia, and it's actually one of the biggest barriers to conducting spay and neuter, I think. That and diseases from parasites like ticks is, if you go to spay and neuter animals, they may have TVT because it is just so common. And they have to go through chemotherapy or even like tumor removal surgery before they can be sterilized and healthy enough to be vaccinated and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty grim. If nobody's heard of it before, it's something that is in a lot of places across the global south. And I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, what do you mean sexually transmitted cancer? That sounds horrific. It's like, yeah, this is what a lot of animals are facing there. If they have sex once, they're at a risk of spreading this horrific condition, and it's a huge reason for spay and neuter. So that's really interesting. I didn't know it exists in Mexico as well. So if you find an animal with TBT and they don't have access to chemotherapy and you guys don't have access to chemotherapy at the clinic, what do you have to do?
Well, our clinic here in Playa does have access to chemotherapy, so they can treat, but other states don't. And, I assume rescues probably at that point have to humanely euthanize an animal because living and dying with TBT is excruciatingly painful.
Yeah.
No animal should have to go through that. And if the resources aren't there, I personally think that's the most humane thing to do. We're very lucky in Playa, in Quintana Roo, the state that we're in, that there is access, and it's 6 to 8 rounds. Definitely expensive if you look at the average Mexican salary, but for an organization like us, it's doable. It's probably between like 500 and 1,000 USD, which if you compare that to like chemotherapy in the US, which is like 8, 10 plus thousand, it's considerably cheaper here, but that's still, that's a lot of spay and neuters that we could do for that money as opposed to chemotherapy. So ideally, it's just spay and neuter everything we can get our hands on so that we prevent things like that. And I know you brought up ticks a bit when you were talking about Vietnam and Cambodia. We have that issue here too. So we have Ehrlichia and Anaplasma that are spread through ticks. And we are in a tropical climate, so there are a lot of ticks here. People can get that as well. So that's something that we treat here too with antibiotics. And unfortunately, spay neuter doesn't resolve that in any form or fashion. That's just one of the realities of animals living in the tropics.
But it is another reason why doing spay and neuter, but also providing parasite treatment is truly life-saving when there are conditions like this that are so easy to get. We know parasite treatment should be given every month, but this is their one chance, this one visit to the vet clinic for a lot of free-roaming animals who don't have homes to get that care. So it's better than nothing.
Absolutely.
I remember we were talking a little bit about some of the communities that you go into, and yes, it's common to see like quite severe poverty and lack of proper housing and access to utilities and facilities, but you also work in some quite dangerous areas. If you want to share anything interesting about that and maybe some potentially useful like safeguarding measures you take, like being with people in the community, being with people who speak the local language or know people from that neighborhood in order to make sure that you can do this work and connect with people while staying safe.
Yeah, that's a reality. I mean, I think it's a reality here. It's a reality that we face in the neighborhoods we work in the States as well. A lot of common sense practices. We are there during daylight hours. We, here in Mexico, go with someone who has experience in the community. We have a, point person, I guess you would say, that lives in this particular community that we work with, that helps organize. That really helps. So we're not going door to door. We have like one meeting place in the community and people come to that meeting place. And at this point, there are more than enough people that want our services that we're not having to go door to door to ask and say, can we please have your animal? And people are just, our wait list is long. So a lot of it's just common sense. But yeah, we have to be aware of the fact that there is a fair amount of organized crime, and we're coming into a community where they might not know us. They know, someone that we're with, but they don't know us personally, especially when we're down here visiting, and I'm not down here every week or every day. So a lot of it's just common sense. Like, we're guests, act like it, and be respectful. And I'm not going to show up at 11 o'clock at night knocking on people's doors. So I personally feel very safe here. It's not something I'm concerned about or, think about every minute when I'm out in the field. But again, it's just a lot of common sense and just being a respectful guest.
Yeah, and I feel like also as women, we are going with a man.
Yes, we are always with a man here in Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in the States, a lot the same. I'm working with somebody who is a point person in the community. I'm going during daylight hours. I pay attention to locals when they say, hey, you don't want to be here after 8 p.m. or something like that. I don't just assume I know best or I'm going to be fine. I'm not naive like that. I respect what people are telling me that live in the community, but I don't walk around fearful of the communities I'm there to help provide resources for. I feel very comfortable, and I'm just happy to provide a resource that I know they are asking for and just don't have the same privilege and resources that I have. So they need us to make that available to the community and make that available to them.
Yeah, I really like how you say that we are guests. A lot of times when we're people from a place of privilege who have the ability to travel to another country, which may seem kind of normal, but which points out how privileged we are. Like, I know a lot of people in Greece who don't even have a passport, for example. They have, their ID card from when they were 12. They've never had to do this. A lot of people, the visa restrictions from country to country are a lot more challenging. There are all different kinds of restrictions if you're from the global south. So we just view it as like this normal thing where we can go here and do whatever we want. And yeah, acting like we're a guest rather than like we have the right to be here in a community we're not even from and have absolutely no relation to, other than we want to go hang out at the resort and sit on the beautiful beach, which has been cleared for us to be able to go to a resort, right? So what do you keep in mind? What do you think about when talking about all of these things, especially as people from the global north who come from a background of privilege, who come from, living in predominantly white communities, from middle-class background? Like, how can we be in these places and interface in a way that is not discriminatory or objectifying or, as we said before, like savioristic, and make sure we are managing the place of privilege that we come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always something to be front of mind. And I do want to say that I'm not here to be anyone's savior. That's for sure. And I think having worked here for so long, there is a mind shift. When I first started coming to Mexico and I saw animals free roaming, my thought was just, oh, it's so sad. But my idea of that has changed so much over the years. The alternative to dogs and cats free roaming is that they're chained up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real reality. And that is so much more miserable. And sitting in a loud shelter, being stressed out, we know destroys animals' mental health and then in return, physical health. So is that really the best option? Is it really worse or wrong or tragic that these animals can freely roam and have freedom and access to the world around them?
No.
To me, not really.
No.
Like, my mind has changed on that. I will say, when your goal is spay and neuter, makes it a lot harder when they're able to roam around and have access to each other. I mean, my dream would be that we could build proper fencing for everybody so that animals would have access to move around and shade and, food and water and all of that, and as opposed to just roaming the streets. But maybe one day. Right now, that's not an absolute reality. So I think just I've shifted my ideals and like what my end goal is here. And I'm not here to change a culture. That's not my job. That's not the prerogative. What I want to do always and forever is bring resources to the communities that are facing barriers to pet care and don't have it. That's all I'm here to do. And I'm here to advocate for the animals, but I'm also here to advocate for the people who are put in this position, because I don't think people just choose to not care for the animals around them. I think it's becomes I can either feed myself and my family, or I can feed this street dog or street cat. And I will tell you, a lot of people choose the animal over themselves. So that happens everywhere we work. But, not everybody has that gift, or not everybody has that passion. And so I'm just not here trying to judge. I'm not here trying to save anybody. I'm here advocating for everybody that should have more access, that like these things we're providing should be accessible to everyone, regardless of finances, regardless of social class, regardless of where they live in the world.
But yeah, I think that's a very good point, that as a privileged person, when you go to maybe a less privileged place, to just keep your mind very open instead of judging, and understand the reality of things, and maybe even find the beauty in it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to look like what it looks like back home.
Exactly. And that's not like, it doesn't have to be sad as well. Like if the dogs and cats are healthy and, sterilized, they don't all need to be saved and put in kennels. Like they can roam around as long as, healthy, safe, spayed, neutered. But yeah, that's what we also need to all keep in mind when we travel, I think.
Well, and keep in mind what you can learn when you leave your own little bubble. My city in Minneapolis is better off because I worked in Mexico. I came here, I learned about spay and neuter, I learned about TNR, I learned about how effective it was, and I brought that from Mexico back to the United States, where I helped my community. And I wouldn't have done that had it not been for the work that I did here. So Mexico has benefited America in more ways than one.
I've done the same. I discovered you could TNR in Greece, and I brought it back to France. Never knew it was an option.
Yeah, it just was never talked about back home. Groups weren't talking about it. Still not nearly as popular as rescue.
Yeah.
We're here. People spay and neuter and spay and neuter. I mean, obviously people still rescue. But yeah, it's there's something to learn when you leave home if you keep your mind open and don't assume that you have all the answers.
Definitely. I don't know about you guys. One of my frustrations with the spay and neuter community in the States is there is still such a focus on rescue, even within the spay and neuter community. And general society is very pro, there's an animal on the street, rescue them and put them in a shelter, which as we've already pointed out, an animal living in a shelter until maybe, hopefully, one day they get adopted into a home that is maybe, hopefully, a good fit and they have all of their needs met, which is very unlikely, especially given the sheer numbers of animals that live in the US and in shelters. And maybe hopefully that shelter doesn't euthanize them before they manage to find a home, because euthanasia rates in the States are very, very high. But I've even had comments from other people in TNR on videos and things like that, where I'm sharing maybe like a mother with kittens on the street in Athens, or different situations, and they always say, did you rescue the kittens? Oh, that cat is friendly, did you rescue them? And it's still this like push for rescue is the best solution rather than spay and neuter and return, which I know animals live in difficult situations and it's not ideal, but we're still not going to rescue our way out of that. Like there are options for them to be returned to the environment they live in, and ultimately it's not our job to make sure they live for 15 years. It's our job to make their lives better as much as we can in the moment. We simply cannot rescue our way out of it in addition to doing spay and neuter. So I'm not advocating against rescuing like sick and dying animals, obviously, but it's just really interesting how there's still that culture, especially in the United States and in England as well.
Oh, France too, yeah.
Yeah. To bring them inside, don't put them back outside. They're friendly, they're little fluffy kittens, bring them inside.
Yeah, and I think we see that a lot at Saving Lives when we're trying to raise money. If you try to raise money for TNR, nothing. If you rescue a cat, money is falling from a tree.
Yeah. It's as an organization that went from rescuing to, we did TNR and we did spay and neuter and rescue to just rescue. Wow, yeah, those donations don't come in the same way. That's for sure. People like a cute face to give to. One happy story with a happy ending. But what we say back home too in Minnesota is that the R in TNR is just as important. Returning them is just as important, because in Minnesota, we work with just cats, but they're communities. When you start pulling cats out of the community, that does affect the colony. So we have to be thoughtful about that. And there's a balance, because, right, they reach a number and then the colony is too large, it's unbalanced, and disease starts spreading, and there's not enough food resources, often things like that. But you pull a ton out, it creates something called the vacuum effect. That opens up space for other cats to come in, and often those cats are not altered, and then you start seeing the population rise again. So I do feel strongly that a colony should remain intact. And of course, before anyone goes crazy, there are exceptions. You know, if animals aren't thriving, if it's not safe, if they're sick and suffering, yes, let's hope as animal advocates we intervene, but we have to use some common sense and discern, really, are we doing this for ourselves because it makes us feel better? Or are we doing this for the animal because this is really what's best for them?
And just to clarify, I know we should probably jump to a break, but when you said intact before, just for anybody who uses that terminology for not spayed and neutered, I think you were saying to keep the colony as a colony and not taking individuals out of it, right? Not to leave them intact, unsterilized. Just in case that wasn't clear.
Yeah, everyone is sterilized and the colony is functioning as a whole the way we found it.
Yeah, we need to take a quick break, but we'll be back in a few minutes talking about fundraising when you do TNR.
Begging to hear more of your favorite show? Full episodes of all our shows are available on demand. Go to PetLifeRadio.com to fetch our entire lineup of Possum Pet podcasts. Also, dig us up in iHeartRadio and iTunes. Let's talk pets. Live and on demand, only from Pet Life Radio.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
And we're back with Maia, the founder of Pet Project Rescue. So Maia, Pet Project Rescue is a nonprofit based in Minnesota, but you do fund a lot of sterilization in Playa del Carmen, but also right outside of Mexico City. I just want to know how hard it is to fundraise for Mexico rather than to fundraise for TNR in the US, because you do both.
Yeah, it is significantly harder in Mexico. I think something people don't realize is that most grants apply to Canada and the US. So finding grants from Mexico is an uphill battle. I've been doing this for years and it hasn't gotten easier, to be quite honest. So we do rely a lot on private donors to keep our program running in Mexico. And yeah, it's not the easiest TNR. It's not the easiest sell when it comes to fundraising.
Do you know why those grants won't let you spend it in Mexico? Like, what are the reasons behind it? Because I think what's hard also for you is that, like, your money is worth so much more here, like in Mexico rather than the US, right?
It is incredibly frustrating. We can stretch the dollar and do so much more here. You know, I don't know for sure, but Mexico just doesn't seem to be on people's radar, even though it has some of the largest populations of homeless animals in the world, Latin America in general, and of course we know the global south. But there's a lot of places that just get more attention, like Greece does, Thailand, Sri Lanka is a big one right now. You know, and things kind of change year to year, but Mexico just has never really been on the radar as one of those places that foundations and organizations fund, which is super frustrating to me because probably everyone who works here, because we see how big the need is. But yeah, what I hear a lot from organizations in the US and Canada is that they want to keep the focus in the US and Canada. And what I hear privately from people is that the need in Mexico just seems so big that it doesn't seem like they can really make a dent by helping, which I can tell you is absolutely false. We have made massive progress here. Yes, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but from someone who's been working here since 2007, and I don't live here, so I don't see it day in and day out. I come and I go, so I feel like I can see the change better for that reason. And I feel like there has been so much progress here in countless ways. So I really encourage people to fund Mexico.
You also have a fundraiser coming up or
going on right now.
going on right
Yeah.
now. Yes.
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah, talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, for the month of April. So now through the end of April, we have our 5th annual virtual walk. It's called Pause Across Borders. And we are virtually walking from Minneapolis to Playa del Carmen. with the goal of raising $14,500 to spay and neuter dogs and cats at our weekly clinics, as well as our large November clinic, which is 3 days. And we spay and neuter. Last year, it was 1,100 dogs and cats in 3 days. We're hoping to up that up just a little bit this year.
100?
What's your goal?
Maybe 1,200, yeah.
It's a lot of work, but it's really amazing, and it's so helpful for the community. People come in from all over, even outside Playa, and it's fantastic. So yeah, our Paws Across Borders fundraiser, for every $5 donated, we can get 1 mile closer to our goal. And here in Mexico, it only costs $25 to spay and neuter a dog or cat. So it's really incredibly affordable, and we can do so much with donations. And we don't have overhead costs. We're not paying for vets. We're not paying for facilities. It is 100% of the money going strictly to the surgery costs, and we deworm and that kind of thing.
We will put the link to donate right under this episode.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to know that with just $25, you've changed the fabric of one animal's life. I think one thing people don't realize, especially from the US, is how much of a cost difference there is. As you said, in Mexico, even here in Greece, I can neuter a cat, give them parasite treatment, and remove any teeth that have any problems, give them some long-term antibiotics if they have an infection for €25. In the States, we're talking upwards of 100 for one cat. And so if anybody is frustrated that their money is not having a big impact, donate to countries outside of America.
Yeah.
Because just as you said, much smaller amount of money, you've had a huge impact.
Yeah, I could never reach the number of animals that we are here in Mexico. In the US, it would cost me 10 times as much. One cat in the US ranges from, on the very low end, $75. And that's vets that are working with us at a major discount just because they know what we're doing for the state of Minnesota. They know we're one of the only free resources. So they give us a deal, but really the prices are like $150. So, that's 6 times the cost. So for every one dog or cat in the US, that's 6 dogs or cats in Mexico. I mean, the math is there.
Yeah.
And we need to wrap it up. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But Maia, one last advice or tip for anyone who is maybe traveling to Mexico, wants to TNR, or anywhere in the world, what would you tell them?
Get involved and plan ahead. Don't wait until you show up in a place and say, oh, I want to help. Google it. See what organizations are around. Plan ahead. Send emails. See what you can do. And ask them how you can be helpful. Don't suggest how you can be helpful.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us may think that the ways that we help back home are how we can help elsewhere. And that doesn't always apply. So just be open, follow through, plan ahead, and get involved because you'll have a much better experience. You'll meet amazing people. You get to see the country that you're actually in as opposed to just a resort. And you get to change your life. So what's better than that?
Definitely. The people on the ground have been doing this work for many, many years, and we should absolutely divert to their knowledge as they know better than we do. We're just guests, as you said.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for telling us about all of that. It's been really interesting to hear.
Yes, thank you so much, Maia, for joining us. And we're really excited about this adventure. So thank you for everybody who's listening to this. And we would also love to hear about your experience. So send us a DM on either Saving Lives with 2 A's or Travel Animal Rescue on Instagram. And Maia, you can tell them where they can find you.
We are at petprojectrescue.com. And on Instagram, we are PPR_MPLS. MPLS is Minneapolis shortened. And then we are Pet Project Rescue on Facebook.
Thank you so much, Maia, and see you all at our next episode. And in the meantime, stay out of trouble and keep trapping to save the streets one animal at a time.
Let's Talk Pets every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.